All right, well, welcome everybody to today's Talk with Doc. We've had a couple weeks off due to the Wonderfully Made conference, so it's wonderful to be back with everyone. And it's my honor today to have Beckham Linton with us, a speech-language pathologist. And today we are talking about tips for building a better relationship, better communication between parents and the speech-language pathologist. So a very important topic that I think is going to be very useful for everybody. So Beckham, welcome so much. So glad to have you here. Why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Thanks for asking me to be here. It's an honor. Well, I've been a speech-language pathologist for over 30 years. 30 years. Oh my goodness. And I started, the first half of my career was really working with folks with traumatic brain injury. And this is where I really developed a special interest in social cognition and social communication. Second half of my career, I was in the school system and in Colorado and here in Overland Park, and am currently doing private practice and really focus on that social cognitive communication work with folks. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, so glad to have you here. And again, I think, like when we had talked previously, I thought this is such a great and important concept. We had a fantastic relationship with our speech-language pathologist, with our son, Mark, and that just helped improve, Mark being able to make strides and progress. And so, I think today just being able to go through that is a huge thing. But why don't we just start on the ground floor? What are just some general concerns, both from a parent standpoint and, a speech-language pathologist standpoint, when it comes to all this?
Well, this is, I have a list of general concerns, but it certainly is not an exhaustive list. But, and again, I need to say that I like to see myself as an unbiased person when it comes to this. I am a speech-language pathologist, as well as an ADHD coach. And I have two kids. Neither one of them had IEPs, but, we had some special needs that we needed to kind of support them with. So I've been at the table as a parent and as an SLP. So just thought I'd throw that out there. But some of the key parent concerns that I've actually experienced when I was in the school systems is, why haven't I heard from the SLP yet? A month has gone by, school started, where is she or he? Is my child receiving the services that they actually need? Is the IEP actually being followed?
Right.
Exactly as we agreed to? Is my child making progress in speech therapy? And how can I connect and find out where, how my child is doing? Why haven't I received any homework from the SLP? Some of the other things is, why can't I get more sessions per week? Or some parents feel like their child is being pulled out of class too often. That's also been a concern.
Sure.
Another is why won't the SLP write goals that I've asked for? Is the SLP skilled enough to serve my child? The SLP wants to dismiss my child from services, but I disagree with that. Why isn't my child being included in the classroom all day long? And so there are many, many concerns. I've just touched on a few, but those are the primary concerns that I've heard from parents.
Right.
Are there others that you have that you didn't, that you had or have heard of that I didn't mention?
Yeah, I think those are the biggest ones. I think some of the other ones I've heard from some people is not understanding, what the SLP is asking or trying to do with the child. And you can't hinted on that, but I think that's one big one that comes up sometime, where the parents may not fully understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Okay.
Well, yeah, you want them to do this little thing. What on earth does that have to do with speech?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense sometimes. But if you actually ask the questions, and every speech language pathologist I've ever worked with and talked with have always been great with trying to explain things to the parents.
Yeah.
I think one of my biggest hopes out of today is that parents, especially one, I always say it, every parent needs to be the biggest advocate possible for their child. That's their primary job.
Absolutely.
Well, part of that job as being an advocate is asking the questions and that. And so if a parent is sitting there concerned and not understanding things, they need to ask the question, and it's okay. I think sometimes parents think, oh, you're the professional, you tell us what to do and we just need to do it. I'm just not smart enough. I don't have the education to know about this. And because of that, I don't want to look like an idiot to ask a question.
Yeah.
And that's the absolute wrong way to go about it with it. So I think those are some of the other aspects that I've heard and I see frequently from families.
Yes. Well, I absolutely, I mean, ask any question that you have, because, when you think about a speech language pathologist, our education is not only in speech. I mean, it really should be language and speech or communicate. I don't know. I don't love the term, because we cover articulation, well, content, form, and use of language. So it covers a gamut of, our education. We have to be experts on a lot of different things. And so when you hear our title, a lot of people just assume it's speech, either stuttering or articulation challenges, dysarthria, things like that. But there's so much more. So it makes sense to not fully understand where we're coming from. So please ask.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
I have a list of some of the concerns from the speech pathologist
Yeah, fantastic.
perspective. First and foremost, this was my concern every year, is how will I possibly meet the minutes on 45 to sometimes 65 IEPs, plus completing 10 to 12 evaluations across 3 different schools. It sometimes feels like an impossible job.
Sure,
There's
I can see that.
for one person. 2 times a week isn't enough time for this student, but there's a limit to what I can do by myself. I'd love to give, more, but realistically, what's the, we sometimes have to actually think, because of the system, what's the minimal amount that's still going to make a difference? We have to be really creative, because, we have to look at reality. I can write all these great goals, but am I logistically able to meet them or help, the teams meet them?
Yeah.
What do I do when a student refuses to come with me if I'm pulling them out of class? Or if a teacher requests that I let the student stay for a special activity? That sets the stage for, having to make up sessions, which we really have no time in our schedules for makeup sessions. How will I find the time to create homework assignments for all, of my students? Parents or teachers want me to write IEP goals the student is not yet ready for. That has happened a lot, and it speaks to your situation where, we're just not sharing the same perspective on the child based on our knowledge base and experience. we just see the student from different angles and aren't, and that's one of the larger communication breakdowns, I think.
Sure.
When will I have time to program my students' AAC devices? If you have students with communication devices, that it can take hours to program those devices to meet that specific student's needs. That is very time consuming. Most of the SLPs do that at home. They'll take their devices at home with them, program on the weekends. When will I find time to be with my family? And then inclusion is another topic that I think both parents and SLPs have. Is, inclusion may not always be the least restrictive environment for a student. And so that can be a real topic where disagreement happens. So those are just a few.
Those are great. And I think that's important for families to hear and know. Those are pretty eye-opening and make perfect sense and help us understand, some of the difficulties and concerns on your side of the table as well.
Well, and that's why what you said earlier about, do everything you can to reach out to the SLP. It's not that he or she does not want to reach out to parents. It's just we're snowed under all the time, all year. and that's a reality. But every speech pathologist I've worked with has, the intention to do right by every student. It just doesn't always look that way from the other end.
Right. Well, before we get in, I want to talk about some just common goals of education. But before we get into that, I want to just let's hit just some of the basics first. I know as a pediatrician, I was always asked, well, what is normal talking? When do they start talking? What's the normal amount of speech should a 2-year-old have? Should a 4-year-old have? 5-year-old? Could you just kind of do a quick review of what normal is? What should be expected? Because I think that's important for, families to know, especially as some parents may be going, okay, I've got a 2-year-old who's not talking yet. Is that normal? Is that abnormal? Mm-hmm. I've got a 4-year-old who's got 5 words. Well, they're talking, but is that normal or abnormal? Can you just kind of do a real quick, kind of what the general guidelines are?
Well, we could spend this whole hour talking about that.
Yeah.
You can type in normal speech and language development and we'll find developmental charts that will give you very specific information on, syntax, first words, content, vocabulary, all of that. A good rule of thumb is by the time kids are 5 years old, kindergarten ready, that is our goal, is that they are, independent communicators. And our expectation in our education system, at least, is that all, from 5 years up, kids should be ready to learn as a part of a group, receptively being able to follow, the teacher's directions, kind of follow the group plan generally. I mean, not perfectly. It's, for kindergartners.
Right.
To be able to verbally express themselves effectively if they need to go to the bathroom, or, being able to learn, I need to raise my hand, basic speech and language skills enough to work in a group by the time they're in kindergarten. Now, obviously, that doesn't, all kids are not ready by that time, but that is our expectation.
Right.
As our system is, we expect a lot from our kids, and that's where I kind of wanted to get into talking about the social emotional development and our social minds.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot more than just being able to read and write and, get through the academic piece. Social permeates. I actually see social emotional as being kind of the umbrella under which academic work falls.
Right.
Right. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. So let's go ahead then and jump off of that. And what are some just common goals of education then when we're dealing with speech and language?
Well, I'll start with just general, when you look at CASEL, it's CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is what many of the states and school districts base their mission and vision statements on. And you'll hear college and career readiness, helping our students become, effective contributors in our society. To break it down, there are 5 broad, very interrelated competencies that are developmental. We start from the time kids are in school, building self-awareness, so that kids will understand that, I have thoughts and have control over what I do.
Mm-hmm.
The social awareness is other people also have thoughts that might actually be different from mine.
Right.
And I need to consider their thoughts and adjust my behavior around their needs. Responsible decision making is the third. So being able to, think flexibly and make the right decisions based on the information they have. Self-management, managing their emotions, making the right decisions is related to that. And then relationship skills. So yes, for young children, we're looking at articulation and really homing into the nuts and bolts of what children need, in that moment, the skills, but it's for this greater purpose of raising functional adults that can contribute.
Right.
So that's a big answer, but I do, I have a PowerPoint here, and I've got some slides here. I don't know.
You can share it if you'd like.
Let's give it a shot. This might help.
Be able to share your screen.
Yeah. Hang on just a minute.
And while you're doing that, I'll just say for any of our attendees as you're watching, if you got any questions as we're going through this, feel free to put it in the chat or the Q&A there, and we'll be happy to take your questions as we're moving here.
That'd be great. So I just took a minute to look at some of the vision, mission statements of, well, this one is the Olathe School. Their goal is to prepare students for their future. And they have kind of this idea of the portrait of a graduate. And it relates to some of those 5 areas: critical thinking, problem solving, resilience and social emotional well-being, creativity, communication, initiative, self-direction, these social and cross-cultural skills. So these are the long-term goals, and certainly articulation. And I keep going back to that because that is the speech component, but
okay,
that becomes, part of that effective communicator. Another, some of these larger goals, this is one from Olathe. 100% of students report positive teacher to student relationships. That is their social emotional learning overall goal. Mental health wellness, 100% of students report having strong emotional regulation in order to stay calm and seek help when things go wrong. Grade level reading, 100% of their 3rd graders will read on grade level. And then algebra, all 9th graders will pass algebra. So those are pretty hefty goals.
right.
It never hurts to shoot for the top, but not everyone is going to meet those goals just from the general bell curve. Blue Valley's vision For example, together we will enable each child to become more than he or she ever hoped to be. That leaves a lot of room for everyone. Mission statement: unprecedented academic success and unparalleled personal growth for every student. Again, I like that one because everyone can grow and learn.
Right.
It just may not be at the same pace or in the same way as um, the mass, the general population. So so what happens though when our students have special learning needs? And this is where your teams start coming together, gathering information about how students interpret and respond to information, and start building and creating this fair and appropriate public education, FAPE, that take place within the least restrictive environment, which I'm sure you are familiar with
Absolutely.
that language. And this is where communication breaks down at every level, from the beginning, middle, and the end. So tip number one is we've got to practice what we preach. So if we're trying to get, to help our kids reach this level of social and academic competence, we have to also use all of these skills ourselves as we're doing that. So we have to be self-aware. We have to have social awareness, make responsible decisions, manage our own emotions, and build relationships with each other as a collaborative team instead of, arguing. And that requires a lot of self-discipline when you're angry, right?
Absolutely. Right.
Or just, on different pages. So this is really the one I wanted to show you that, and please interrupt if you have a question.
Sure.
But when it comes to social competency, I guess one of the biggest messages I'd like to put out there is that social is integrated with academics. You just cannot separate the two. And so many teachers and just, parents, also sometimes speech therapists, see our role as just pull them out for a lunch group and work on social skills as though it's a separate entity. But it isn't. It's all connected. So if we look at social competency as an iceberg, and this is the waterline, what you see at the top of the iceberg, the tip, are the social behaviors or social skills that we either see or don't see.
Mm-hmm.
But below the surface, there is a lot of cognitive activity going on prior to knowing what skills to apply. So it looks kind of like this. The base is all about social attention, being able to not only attend to the physical space you're in, but attending to the people in that space, and thinking about, why are they there? What is their intention? What are they thinking and feeling? And we take in all this information so that we can interpret not only what we are thinking ourselves, what our thoughts are, but what are the thoughts of others, so that we can figure out what's expected right here and now.
Okay.
Then we immediately start considering our options. So if kids are in a class, the teacher's lecturing, for example, and all the kids are expected to sit in their seats and take notes or pretend like they're interested, at least sitting forward. Then the teacher says, all right, we're going to form ourselves into small groups. The expectations have changed, and all of a sudden we have choices to make. I could sit here at my desk and wait for others to come to me. I could go join that group. I could raise my hand and ask the teacher what to do. I could run out of the room. I can crawl under my desk. I could put my head on the table. lots of choices. This is where flexible thinking comes in. And then we make the best choice, and that's where the social skill happens. Now, for many of our students with social learning challenges, they don't take in all of the information, so their interpretation can often be incomplete or
skewed.
This is where that black and white, real rigid type of thinking can happen, where they can only consider, I'm either going to have a meltdown or, run out of the room, or, just sit here. Their choices are very limited. And this is where you see in their behavior, oftentimes, this is where teachers, are noticing, well, he or she can't pay attention, or they're blurting out, or whatever it is, the skills that aren't happening in the class that brings everyone to the IEP table.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this piece here is that interpretation piece right here.
In the middle. Okay.
And this is the critical thinking. It just breaks it down a little further. And these, it just helps see how complex a human mind is. And language is integrated into our cognitive ability, processing speed. But we have to consider, what is the people around me, what is their world knowledge? What do they know? What's been their experience compared to mine? What's the situation right now? Who are these people and how are they related to one another? What are their intentions? Considering all of their emotions. Self-conscious emotions are more about emotions that really require the knowledge of other people, like embarrassment, shame, jealousy, basic theory of mind, understanding that we all have thoughts, but my thoughts might be different from yours. And then, being able to apply and adjust our own behavior based on all of that knowledge. So this is what we call critical thinking. It happens socially, not just in reading comprehension, math, but social situations as well. And then this last piece, if you take the the tip of the iceberg, the social skills, the rim or the outline here, how kids respond is also affected by sensory processing challenges. From being bothered by a tag, that we're taking in information from all of our senses, and it can be absolutely overwhelming for kids to where they're missing a lot of information.
Right.
Anxiety, absolutely. Taking all of that in, if there's any challenge whatsoever, processing all this information, it's going to certainly raise your anxiety, and over time can create depression, turn into depression, which is a serious thing that we all need to be aware of. And then there is the screen time overload on portable devices. There's lots of research coming out more and more that it is really affecting our neurology, the time we spend in front of a screen. So overall, that is when you're thinking about social, I'm hoping you can see now how much more is involved than just social skills, greeting, eye contact, turn taking. It's a very cognitive process.
Right. Yeah, I think that's extremely helpful, Beckham, because I think just, I think really because you really don't think through it, be honestly, that and realize how much of social behavior really is speech and language based with that. And so, realizing the role that an SLP can play in helping that social interaction in your child is vital. So I think that's great in helping our families make that connection, make that realization. Because I think all too many times, as a parent, if they got a child, in speech, they're saying, well, it's just the actual speech. They're getting the words and learning how to say and how to get more out. But it's so much more that you all are working with, and it's a bigger picture. And so I think that did a great job showing that
Yeah.
and helping open those eyes.
Well, and it's also, I try to simplify things just for my own understanding and to explain this to people is, we take information into our brains from all of our senses. So that's the input. We process it and make sense of it. We interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to figure out what to do with it, how to respond. That's the output.
Right.
So receptive language, interpretation, expressive. So the speech can be articulation, but it can also be, how well does the student understand how words go together, how to organize his or her thoughts and put them into words in a way that I can share my thought with you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the concept of sharing thoughts is, that is what's needed. It's required for this idea of inclusion, which is a soapbox, and I'll try not to get on it. But
Oh, good.
The whole idea of inclusion, I think, is misinterpreted by a lot of very intelligent educators and parents. But it really, if you want someone to be included, they have to be able to at least, share some thought with the rest of the group. Otherwise, they're not included.
They're just there.
They're just there. And that's not good for anyone, especially for the child who's just there and not able to share in that experience. And that's all about thinking socially. Because our kids who need to learn outside of the classroom, some of the things, not all day, but many of our students have enough awareness to know when they're just being placed in a classroom and someone's calling it inclusion. There's an awareness there in our students, and that doesn't feel good to many of our students.
Right.
Who can't participate.
Yeah.
So that can be a touchy subject, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, let's then get into one of the big things. What can we do, or how can we all get on the same page? The parent as well as the SLP with it. And I think a lot that we've talked about already helped bring us to that point. But what else can we do?
Well, there's a methodology called social thinking. There's a speech-language pathologist, her name's Michelle Winner, who created this methodology. It's also a publishing company, but she's done amazing work in helping us understand. She created the social competency model. I should have mentioned her name when I showed that to you. But she has taken, the last 25 years data of all of the students from, school age through adulthood, and has figured out that there are 5 general trends in terms of how people interpret and process and respond to information, and has created I will share my screen again with you, I think.
Sure.
Takes me a minute.
You're all good.
So she has created something called the social thinking, social communication profile. Let me make sure, yeah. And has, there are lots of people that are doing current research and digging deeper into this. This is just her interpretation of all the data that she's collected. And so she's, there are these 5 general trends. So there are significantly challenged social communicators, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what these are about. Challenged social communicator, emerging social communicator, nuanced challenged, and then neurotypical. And these really, coincidentally, align with the new autism levels in the DSM-5, but
Right.
that's a whole different conversation. So the significantly challenged, you can kind of get an idea here about, these students tend to have very limited language skills and learning abilities. Challenged are, again, very literal. They've got more language that available to them to communicate their basic needs, and maybe a little more, but they are literal. Their critical thinking and self-awareness is very challenged. They have difficulty adjusting to the needs of other people. The emerging social communicators also tend to be literal, but can be have splinter skills or even gifted in certain areas. The nuance challenge, these folks tend to have a lot more social anxiety. These, like the emerging social communicators, tend to have more peer support because some of their challenges may be a little more obvious when you meet them. Whereas the nuance challenge communicators, we are less forgiving of their errors, which raises their anxiety. And so you get a lot of these folks experiencing anxiety, depression, things like that. And then neurotypical, which, neurotypicals make social mistakes all the time too. But
Right.
you ask, understanding that there are levels of social minds really does help get everyone on the same page. And it's not when you're at the IEP table trying to create effective goals for these kids. One of something that I experienced on a regular basis in IEP meetings is anybody on the team having expectations that far exceed the child's ability to meet the goals within a 1-year period, which is what the IEP is all about. It covers a 1 year, and that's not even a year. It's really about 8 months with
Right.
all the time off and everything. So helping, and this is hard information to take in for a lot of people. But it's important to understand that the goal is not necessarily to move an emerging social communicator up to neurotypical, but to write goals and measure progress compared to themselves versus we've got 2 years to get him up to speed. That's just not helpful and creates a lot of distress in the whole process of supporting our students,
Sure.
in my experience. So you can see there is an upward trend, and individuals, human beings, can learn across their lifetime until they're in their deathbed, in my opinion. It's just understanding, getting everyone on the same page about where the child is and where they can effectively get to and still feel success and continue to move forward.
Right. Right. No, that's great. Um, and I think, just one quick question there. And I've heard this asked time to time. And it comes with the IEP real quick.
Mhm.
You know, should you expect the SLP to be at the IEP table with that? And I know, like you said earlier, you, a lot of times the SLP has their plate so full all the time, and that may not always be able to happen. But is that something that you should expect if you're getting those services?
Absolutely, I would. Now, and if they can't be there, you know, some some students who are receiving SLP services will receive these services indirectly. And there's a lot of confusion around what that means too. And so it's if I was a therapist and I saw a student indirectly, that means that I'm spending a lot of time working with the teachers and the paras, the people that are with the students more than I can be with them, teaching them how to teach the student what the SLP goal is, whatever
Mhm.
that is.
Right.
Um, building communication boards, programming the devices, things like that can be counted as indirect. So you may not necessarily be with the student, but you're with the people who are with the student
Right.
and training them. Sometimes in that case, at an IEP meeting, if it's indirect service, if the SLP is communicated with the teacher and the para and those people are at the meeting, then the SLP may not attend the meeting. But that needs to be communicated. The SLP, in my mind, should let the parents know why they're not going to be there
Mhm.
and at least send a written summary or report through the para or teacher or someone.
And just kind of playing on top of that, I think it's absolutely okay then for the parent to ask for a follow-up with the SLP at some point if they've got specific questions for
Absolutely.
them and that. So again, that gets into it because this is a partnership, and the one thing I want, and I'll speak for you and all SLPs, but every single speech language pathologist I've ever met in my life and that I've worked with, they all care so much for the individuals they're working with, and that's why they're doing what they're doing, and they
Yeah.
want to see success. They want to see your child succeed and improve and meet the goals. So everyone's on the same page. But let's go ahead. We're coming down to our last 15 minutes here. Let's kind of flip now into what are some tips on how we can actually have this better communication and better relationship between the parent and the SLP. What can we actually do to help improve this and move forward?
Yeah. Well, my first thing on the list is to remember that every parent and every SLP has good intentions to do right by the student.
Yeah.
I mean that's the first part of being a social being is thinking about other people and what they're coming to the table with. We all want the same thing. Um, Also, secondly, email or call the parent or the SLP. This is for both parents and SLPs. SLPs need to call parents when they can, however they can, or email them just to say, I'd love to talk with you. Just to touch base, even if you don't say anything, just it brings comfort to know, okay, she's thinking about me, the parent, and vice versa.
Right.
Ask questions to learn more about the student from each person's perspective. So parents need to ask as many questions of the SLP, why they're doing what they're doing, how they came to the conclusions they came to, um, anything that they have questions about, ask. And the SLP should ask parents about, what do you see at home? Because oftentimes kids present very differently at school than they do at home.
Oh, so true.
And they go home oftentimes and have these huge meltdowns when they've kept it together all day at school. And, everyone's like, oh, I've never seen him melt down, but the parents are about to pull their hair out.
What do you mean? It's all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's very common. So it's really important for us to ask each other questions about what we see. Begin IEP meetings by looking at your district's vision and mission statement. I mean, there's a purpose for that, and really kind of go back to, are we really keeping the vision in mind as we work through this? I'd also ask for a written agenda for the IEP meetings. Either the psychologist or anybody can do it, and parents can actually contribute to that, just to keep everyone on the same page and focused on what the task at hand is.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some other things that I know we're almost out of time, but I'm going to show you just
We're doing good.
I'm going to share my screen again, just when we're thinking about, whoops. There are these 4 steps of communication that speech pathologists, when you're teaching social thinking, we teach this to kids. The first step is to think about the people that you're around. What is their intention? How are they feeling? What are they thinking? Really get into taking perspective of the other person, as well as, thinking about what impression do I want to leave with the parent, with the IEP team. Second step is minding your physical presence, walking in with a positive stance and how you move. Are you rolling your eyes when you disagree, or are you holding a neutral face? Eyes, connecting with eyes, at least listening with your eyes. If someone's saying something you don't agree with, you can still listen, nod your head, acknowledge that you've heard them, even if you vehemently disagree. Just using that skill, and then minding the words that you say and your tone. I just came up with this acronym too for meetings or anytime, if it's just you and the SLP or a whole team. Once again, it's talk. The T is think about the perspective of others. A, acknowledge by nodding your head, acknowledge what people say, but also ask questions. Listen with your eyes and your body. And just the K is for kind language and tone. We teach our kids to regulate their emotions, right, and communicate effectively. That's what we're wanting. But in order to teach that, we have to know how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's gold. That's pure gold there. And great recommendation there. Let me ask you just kind of one other tip that I've heard, and just from parents in the past. As you know, frequently an SLP will send homework home for the kids to be doing, or exercises to be doing. Mm-hmm. How do you help the parent get on the page, and realize that's important to be doing at home and spend time on it? I've talked with, or I've heard from some parents who think, well, that's the whole reason they've got time with the SLP, so that they work on all that. I don't need to be doing that at home. I've got too many other things, and I don't know how to do it. So how would you approach that parent and help them realize, help me help you type of thing? Yeah. Really with this.
That is a challenge not only for parents. It's just getting everyone on the same page, like you said. And I know, being aware that parents are busy too, and they may not have a clear picture of what their kid needs and worry about doing it wrong or reversing some progress. They have worries about that. What I have found the easiest is to send the parents some websites. There are a lot of websites that have fun games that get right at, there's one website called Speaking of Speech. It used to be free. I'm not sure if that's changed now, but it had tons of activities for every sound, for language, vocabulary, social, all kinds of options there. But ask your SLP for some websites that pertain to the goals.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's nothing that you can do that's going to hurt. I mean, just communicating, reading books to your kids, spending time with them, face to face, without screens, is homework.
Right, right.
And,
And I think the other thing I'd add on top of that is, some of these things you can just add in your daily life and when you're out and about and things. And I'll use an example I remember for us. One of our assignments was, to try to help our son, learn animal sounds. And that was just going to help him, get his mouth using
yeah,
right and everything. So whenever we, if we're out on a walk or we're driving in a car, hey, what sound does this animal make? What's this one make? And
yeah,
things like that. And so that kind of became a game whenever we'd see these animals try to make these sounds and play things like that. Or when we were trying to say the word flower, hey, what are these? And flower and helping with that. So
yeah,
it's realizing you need, your job as a parent, again, being that self-advocate, you want to help them, with us. Every chance you get to help them through it is an absolute bonus.
yeah,
So apply it in their everyday life as you're walking and as you're talking and doing other things, but include them in that.
right,
And you'll see all of a sudden it's not a fight and it's not that hard and becomes easier. But I think just coming back to it, the bottom line again is encourage that open line of communication between the parent and the SLP.
yeah,
That is just so important to help with everything, and it'll help clear the air. It'll help everyone understand what's going on. But I can't say it any stronger. Parents know that the SLP is there fighting for your child.
yeah,
They are on your side. They are on your team. They're not trying to work against you. They're not, doing anything to try to harm your child.
yeah,
They are absolutely there trying to help your child and make every gain possible. And so if you don't understand why they're doing something, ask that question.
mhm,
Just don't sit there and think, oh, they're just, blowing my kid off. That's
right.
never the intention.
Yeah, just don't make assumptions, assume that everyone's out for the same positive, we all have the same good intentions.
Right.
And to speak one more, say one more thing about what you said, just,
Yeah.
the best homework is just playing with your kids, interacting with them. I mean, the last thing kids really want is another worksheet, but, sometimes they come in handy, give them coloring books or whatever, but just that face-to-face interaction and word play and hide and seek and I spy, things like that, that's communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there, there's also, so many different board games and things like that you can do and too that are fun.
Yeah, and the SLP has tons of ideas for how you can build that in naturally so it doesn't feel like homework.
Right.
um,
Right. Absolutely. Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour here. Beckham, thank you so much for taking time with us today. Just want to see, any final thoughts, any final things you'd like to share with our families today on this topic?
I would say language plus thinking equals social emotional health. And, if we all do that, not just for our children, but if all of us are tapped into that, imagine what could happen.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's about it. I appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, loved it. And thank you so much. Well, I want to let everybody know about our talk for next week. Our talk next week will actually be on the basics of homeschooling special education. And I think it's going to be we had to get it rescheduled, unfortunately, but I think especially currently with what our situation is, so many of you are inadvertently doing home, schooling, with so many schools being, either hybrid or you might be virtual, and you're having difficulties. Well, we'll be talking through all that. Our guest will be Peggy Ployhar. She is the founder and CEO of SPED Homeschooling down in Texas. It's a national organization. She's phenomenal. And so come with any questions that you have with that. If you're considering, doing homeschooling, if you're sitting here going, oh, I just don't like how things are going with COVID and all that, you definitely need to tune in. She's just a huge wealth of information, and we'll be going through all of that. A couple other things just want to share with everyone. If you missed our Wonderfully Made conference, have no fear. We still have everything available for you through our VIP subscription. We're just for $50. You have access to every talk we had. Plus, we'll be loading extra talks throughout this next year. You'll have 12 months of access with everything completely there. If you're interested in that, you can go to wonderfullymadekc.com, wonderfullymadekc.com, and do that. If you enjoy these talks, I encourage you to partner with us. We'd love to have you help us out financially. You can go to soarspecialneeds.org/donate to do that. But again, Beckham, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a joy. And for all of our parents out there, I encourage you to make sure you're having a good relationship with your SLP, your SPED teacher, with everyone. It just helps everyone out so much. But it really does. It all just starts out with communication.
Yep.
And communication is key. So Beckham, thank you so much for being with us today.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much, Doc. Have a good one.
I will. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Have a blessed week. We'll see you.